if you are new to Bitcoin here on this video, it's going to be a very important video to make all the way through. You know that if you would have arrived to the party in April of 2011, you could have purchased 5,000 of these things with $5 grand in your pocket. Well, I mean, not these exactly, right? This was $4.99 on Amazon, so. But
Close.
5,000 digital tokens now are worth, guess how much? Let's take a look. All right, we've got $55,313 per Bitcoin at this very moment. Important to say that with Bitcoin. So if we take 5,000 times 55,313, 276,565 million. No, wow. 276,565,000. My apologies. $276.5 million. So obviously it makes sense for us to come back onto the channel, talk about Bitcoin. Everybody's got questions. We're all hearing about it everywhere. And given my recent success in Bitcoin personally, even though I haven't yet hit the $270+ million point, I said, hey, we've got to come together and kind of have this lowbrow, maybe casual podcast style conversation about this today. And I want to put it on tape for everybody to check out, because I think perhaps it might help some people decide whether or not they want to invest in Bitcoin too. After all, I mean, obviously knowledge is power, and this video is trying to prove that to the tune of $276 million. So I have been putting a lot of my own money into cryptos and Bitcoin specifically over the past 7 or 8 months. And since doing that, I've had a lot of loved ones, family members, friends who are sort of peppering me with questions about it at this point. And it's for one of two reasons. Either they've been hearing a lot about it too, and they're considering investing into it themselves, or it's, you know, people like my mom who are convinced that I'm nuts and that, you know, I'm headed for financial disaster here. So
maybe a little both.
You never know. You know, time will tell. Time will tell. I do want to start by saying that $240,000 is not an insignificant amount of money to me. So if my mom does end up being right about this, you know, it's gonna hurt. It would hurt, but she won't be right. She's going to be wrong. We're going to talk about that today, why I'm certain that this will be the best investment of my life. Probably goes without saying, I could have used that money in a lot of different places. I could have plowed it into my businesses or into more properties. At the price tag I like, which are the sort of lower end $150,000, $250,000 range on real estate, could have picked up a nice little addition to the portfolio. I could have invested into debts. Could have been focusing on income producing assets versus Bitcoin. Why am I not only not paying or investing in these other things and not paying off the mortgages as fastly, but actually I even took out a refinance at a record low interest rate last year to set the money on the sidelines, made videos about it, said, look, opportunities are coming. This is that opportunity for me. Okay, so we're going to unpack this together. Michael and I are going to share why I've decided to break even some of my most consistent and important rules related to pursuing, you know, other types of assets than Bitcoin. I mean, I like income. I support cash flow maximization. So buying Bitcoin is a bit of a contradiction to that. And what I do want to do today too, if you're open to it, Michael, is I want to explore this tool that I came across that should let me access my Bitcoin in cash within literally days, if not as low as 1 day, and do so without even having to sell my Bitcoin. So it works very similar to the infinite banking concept, right? I can pull money out of it and my portfolio continues to grow because essentially I'm just sort of securing a loan against it. Mm-hmm. So very interesting developments that are happening inside this space that give me a lot more confidence that it could very well possibly be one of the ultimate places to really focus some effort and some attention. So while we're kind of jumping in here, let's go ahead and ask everybody to comment if they wouldn't mind. I'm curious, Where do you guys guess the price of Bitcoin is headed? Say by the end of 2021, and then I'm always interested in knowing where you think it's going over the long term. Call it 10 years, which is where my focus is much more long term with this. So leave a comment. Where do you think we're going to be at the end of 2021? Where we're going to be at by the end of 2031? What are your thoughts on that, Michael? Have you given any consideration to speculative values?
The sky's the limit. From what I'm reading right now, a lot of people are obviously projecting. I've heard as high as 500 million. I've read articles that are that. I've read that the bottom's going to completely fall out, and I've read everything in between of it. So, you and I have been talking about this offline for a couple of years right now. We're both fairly aggressive investors. I would stand to say we're not. Neither one of us are particularly risk averse, which I think is obviously leans us towards it being a stronger investor or more aggressive investor. I have picked up a position in Bitcoin per your prompting. I don't have as large a position as you do, but I'm like anyone. I like to watch it grow. The only kind of issue or drawback for me is I've been programmed to be an investor that is getting income off of my assets every single month, and this is not that play. So kind of changing my mindset has been a little bit of an adaptation for me. I've had to look at it through a different lens. Now I do have some long-term investment plays, but even a lot of those, buy and holds, for example, they are spitting out that get rich slow money, which I certainly appreciate. And I knew that going in, eyes wide open, that those were not going to get me rich overnight, of course. So I would look at this Bitcoin as a little bit more of a long-term play with obviously a much higher trajectory than any type of buy and hold real estate play would be.
I hope we can dive into the cash on cash speculation with even a red hot real estate market as a comparison tool against Bitcoin, because that's always seemingly the asset class that I'm looking at everything. I'm weighing against everything else. It's sort of my baseline, and then I compare everything else to that, because if I don't do something else, I'm going to be doing real estate. So guys, I do ask that you guys drop a like for Michael here on the video. For those of you who don't know, Michael has been saving the day. I am living in this fine RV that you are seeing behind me here on a full-time basis at this point, and it is making getting content up as fast as you guys deserve almost impossible. So I approached Michael and said, look, you are one of the most trustworthy people that I know with the background of success in both real estate and entrepreneurship. There is no one else but you that could really sort of fill in the gap and supplement where that content is needed. So drop a like, show Michael some love. It really helps the channel out a lot. If you are new to Bitcoin here on this video, it's going to be a very important video to make all the way through. Also, if you have had some success already in the crypto space, in Bitcoin, make sure you're chiming in as well. Drop comments below. Let us know perhaps where there might be other resources that you think would help me, would help other people. We're all in this together, guys. We can literally all get filthy rich on Bitcoin. Nobody has to be left behind at all here. So, Michael, if it's okay with you, I wanted to kind of use my trusty calculator today, as we already have started off doing, to calculate a $276 million missed opportunity. And I also want to kind of go into screenshots today, dig into exact numbers throughout the video, because, for people who are like me, when I'm looking at numbers, especially numbers that are already really, really hard to believe, but 276, if I came on and said 276 million missed out on, it starts to lose perspective of reality in a way. So I want the calculator to do the speaking, okay? So I want to get as specific as possible. That helps feeble brains like mine. And speaking of specifics, if you want to understand more about how you get the money that you need in order to buy Bitcoin, make sure you're digging through our older videos here on this channel. I provide countless videos that really dig into the nuts and bolts and the actual dollars and cents related to building credit and getting access to capital that we then use to grow cash flow with. And whether you like it or not, it's the only way that you're going to be able to afford Bitcoin is by having capital and by having cash flow. So the principles taught on this channel are the pathway to what we're here to talk about today, which is ultimately going to end up being, again, I think the opportunity of history, not just the opportunity of our lifetimes. I think this will go down as probably the single greatest. If it hasn't already, again, a $5,000 investment jumping to a $276 million valuation in 10 short years, I think the point is already proven in a sense. So I hate to admit it, but I am walking around with this mug. I don't know if you guys can see this on the video there. It says future Bitcoin millionaire. It does not say current Bitcoin millionaire, and that's obviously disappointing. That's because when I showed up to the party, I couldn't even buy one Bitcoin for 5,000 in my pocket. And in fact, if you go back to August of 2020, when I jumped back into crypto, and I'm going to go into my actual transaction history here through Coinbase, I find that I have a one Bitcoin purchase on August 31st for $11,954.85. 12 grand. I didn't even get half of a Bitcoin for 5 grand. So it's not, I am waiting for this to happen, folks. And since that day, I counted here on my transaction history, I have bought and or sold Bitcoin 24 different times since August 31st. The ride has been crazy, needless to say. It has been quite a journey and not one for the faint of heart. You can just see from my journey since August, lots of ups, lots of downs, and I do have to confess something that I was not created with a strong heart. I have a faint heart, okay? And unfortunately, that means that I get scared and I panic and I obsess over information and values. I am not an experienced non-income producing asset investor. My investment experience is exclusively into income producing assets. So when values are dropping quickly, it's terrifying. In fact, this isn't even my first journey with crypto. I went in 4 years ago in 2017 when there was that previous parabolic run up to $20,000, and I freaked out, cut my losses after about a $35,000 loss. And when I started seeing that money vanishing before my eyes, I panic sold, just like you're not supposed to do. So what I want to try to dig into today is why I take a $35,000 black eye and then I look for as many ways now, 4 years later, 3.5 years later, to buy as much more of this as I possibly can. So we're going to get into the properties that make this so desirable and why I'm so confident that things are going to continue to go up. I am not suggesting that anybody here take a similar approach to this. Levels of bullishness, I think, are completely subjective. I like, what's her name? Lynn Alden has a great outlook on this. Her concept of investing in Bitcoin is the anything but zero or anything but nothing strategy with Bitcoin. If you've got $0 into Bitcoin, you're making a big mistake. Okay, so have something. And I do think it's a great time for a disclaimer. I hope to nudge people to buy Bitcoin through a video like this because, again, I see the writing on the wall. It's all based on trends. You and I have made a video before, Michael, about trending, just looking at trends when you're making buying decisions. I think this is one of the easiest trends to spot at the moment. But make sure you're doing your own research, obviously. Buy it, don't buy it. Buy $5 a month of it. Buy $50 one time and forget about it. 500, 5,000, 500,000, it really doesn't much matter to me. I believe very strongly in 10 years, you're going to wish it was more no matter what you do end up putting into this thing. So only be willing to put in what you're willing to lose, right, Michael?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head right there. And that's why ultimately I gained a position. And after hearing you, browbeat me for years effectively on it, but it took a while for me to take off one investment hat. As a real estate investor, obviously I like to get those month in, month out returns, that kind of instant gratification, if you will. Now there are long-term plays like commodities that obviously I'm involved in. And, those aren't things I'm just going to sell off because the market's going up or down. But, if you take a look at what's going on with Bitcoin, for example, or just across all crypto, there's just so much excitement behind it. Obviously, we had the Coinbase, not IPO, but direct listing last week, which has obviously brought a ton of attention to the space. But real estate's through the roof right now too. So it's this, the crypto is just skyrocketing. Real estate is skyrocketing. Everyone's trying to look at the tea leaves, but you said, look at the trends. And as an investor, once people have done it, you're in the game too late. So you have to get out in front of it. You have to follow the trends, look at the tea leaves, do your own research, of course, which is what we always preach on this channel. And once you are able to make an informed decision, whether it's to buy in or not to buy in, just feel comfortable with it. And don't do the knee jerk like Matthew did. I'm sure he would love to still have that $35,000 at that cost basis in there from 2 years ago, or 4 years ago, actually.
Yeah, you're completely right. I think that brings up a really terrific final point here on the sort of disclaimer portion of buying Bitcoin. Pro tip reminder here is don't sell your frickin' asset for less than you bought it for. And that goes for real estate, which we all can think back to a relatively short period of time ago. Property values took a plunge. A lot of people either short sold or foreclosed, and those values are at all-time highs once again, right? Gold, same thing. You're going to have ups, you're going to have downs. Don't sell below what you bought it for. Pretty simple strategy here, guys. I think the moral of the story boils down to, Michael, you know, only buy stuff that you can afford to hold on to if the waters happen to get rough. Okay? Mm-hmm. Very simple. And I wish I could go back in time and tell my younger self that. I know it now. I'm holding on to Bitcoin essentially forever, following the Michael Saylor strategy stuff. So I want to talk right now about why so many people believe that Bitcoin is imminently headed towards a minimum of $500,000 a coin. Imminently, okay? Because this is what struck me the first time. And I'm going to throw a bunch of links down in the description below for everybody. I'll kind of put together like some of my favorite videos and maybe a little like crypto starter kit that you can spend a couple hours listening to and fall in love with some of these educators on the subject. I am not an expert by any stretch of the imagination on this. I'm just simply here to share with you my story and why I'm so bullish about it. Lean into the experts for information and for details about this. But this is my takeaway from what I've learned so far, and you'll see some of this elaborated about in the videos that I put down there for you. First and foremost, Bitcoin is being considered, you know, digital gold. That's what you're going to hear more than anything else, is that there's this direct comparison between the standard of gold, which has been a valuable asset for longer than anything else, right? Thousands of years. And it breaks down to desirability, right? What makes something desirable? What makes gold specifically desirable? Gold is desirable because of a collection of different properties. First of all, it is scarce, and that's going to be the very first thing that you hear acknowledged regarding why Bitcoin continues to develop this sort of crazy popularity. And at the end of the day, the scarcity factor of this is set in stone for all of eternity, right? I mean, you've got 21 million total Bitcoin, and there will only be 21 total million Bitcoin forever. When you compare that to other asset classes, gold being the first because that's the closest that people are generally looking at, it has finite value too. They just don't know how much. They're still digging it up, and, you know, frankly, by the way, have you ever really even tried to use gold? It's crazy. Like, you know, outside of jewelry and maybe what they've shoved into my iPhone here, I honestly don't really know how to use gold. I've never purchased anything with it. I can't imagine buying a Tesla with it, much less a coffee. I feel that gold is not really all that functional, but the comparison is there of there being supply demand issues, and that's obviously really strong, demonstrated in real estate right now. That's the whole reason real estate's taking off, is because there aren't enough properties, right? So we see the power of scarcity, and that's going to be, I think, the biggest one for Bitcoin. There are two other big properties that they're compared to with gold. The second being portability, and the third being divisibility. So portability meaning you could pack it all into your bag and travel with it and take it with you. Third is obviously that you shave little pieces off of it, and that's how you're supposed to buy your Starbucks, I guess. I really have no idea, right? But it can be, you can buy little pieces of it or a lot of it. And so when we look at the comparison between those three properties, we've already established that the 21 million Bitcoin is much more scarce really than gold or even real estate. People say, oh, yeah, there's only so much land. We've heard that our whole lives in the old fashioned way of thinking, oh, they can never make more land. And I tend to sort of disagree in some ways, because even if you run out of land to build on, you can always build up too, right? So that there's always this like infinite ability to create more places to live. And then,
Look at
again,
Tokyo.
gold, right? Exactly. That's probably the best example. I would say, from a portability standpoint, I mean, I'd much rather have access here where I can just QR code myself to a purchase. And we're starting to see the adoption of Bitcoin in so many other ways by so many companies that functionality is becoming better and better almost every day, it feels like. Even Venmo just launched a way of exchanging Bitcoin this week to 70 some odd million more users, right? So we know that
Yeah.
functionality
In addition to that, yeah. And in addition to that, MasterCard and Visa just put it on their merchant platform. Goldman Sachs has announced that they're rolling it out to their private wealth clients. Morgan Stanley as well. I mean, those are heavy, heavy hitters. And like you said, that Venmo announcement, 77 million users now can buy and exchange Bitcoin right on their platform. And that's just amazing.
We're going to just keep seeing more and more and more of it. There are some estimations that really there's only been about a 5% adoption rate to this thing right now too. Now that number could be way off. I'd love somebody to comment below and correct me on that, whether it's more or less. But hoping for less, because that just means there's going to continue to be a larger and larger surge of people that are getting involved in the space. But I think that there are a lot of additional benefits behind the Bitcoin comparison than just portability and just divisibility. Because for those of you who don't know, I think a lot of people, when I talk to family or friends, they're like, oh man, Bitcoin's at 55,000, Bitcoin's at 60,000. Bitcoin hit almost 65,000, if not over, just within the last couple of weeks. And they're like, I can't spend $65,000 on a Bitcoin. And so that tends to be a pretty big barrier of entry. And you don't have to, because of the divisibility of it. You can literally buy 0.0001 Bitcoin in order to give yourself start at a portfolio. And most people that I learn from recommend the dollar cost averaging point of view. If you just set up an auto buy either every week, you're putting in 25 bucks or 250 bucks or $2,500. Right now I have an auto buy set up for 500 weekly, but I'm also trying to dump as many tens of thousands that I possibly can in. So let's talk a little bit about some of the other benefits that I've sort of contemplated since really, getting involved in Bitcoin. I just think overall functionality, I think just overall user friendliness. If I want to get access to my Bitcoin, I can go in here right now. So my portfolio right now, just so that everybody is very, very clear, is at a $342,000, 256 balance. That's under my Coinbase account. And then I've got a Robinhood account that is currently sitting at $18,932. The combination of that, 18,932 plus the Coinbase of 342,256, we're looking at $361,188. If I am taking that 361,188 and I'm subtracting out my $240,000 initial investment, I'm looking at roughly a $121,000 gain, most of which is so far just this year. So we're 3.5 months into the year. I'm looking at $121,000 in my pocket. If I divide that out by the $240,000 in my initial investment, I'm right at a 50%, 50.49% ROI on my current investment. I look at that and say, well, what would that do? What would that same money do if I were to put it into real estate? Right? And I think there's some very simple math that we can contemplate here. Again, I'm looking at the $150,000 to $250,000 purchase price range. I find that cash on cash returns tend to be higher when you're shopping for less expensive real estate. When you start to get more expensive, it becomes tricky unless you're short-term renting it, which becomes an active income stream, obviously. So from a passive long-term buy and hold, put a long-term tenant into the house type of standpoint, on a $250,000 purchase price on the high end of that, just to be conservative here, I would need $50,000 obviously as a down payment. Okay. Now, let's say that I'm pulling, call it a $500 per month net cash flow position. That's after PITI, that's after management, that's after maintenance is factored in. I'm looking at roughly $6,000 per year in net cash flow that I'm missing out on by investing in a non-income producing asset. And I have to look at that and consider it. Furthermore, another downside to cryptos and Bitcoin is that I cannot get a mortgage to buy Bitcoin. I cannot buy $250,000 worth of Bitcoin with only $50,000 out of my own pocket. $50,000 out of my pocket gets me exactly $50,000 worth of Bitcoin the day I buy it. And I think that's a real disadvantage relative to say real estate, right? Well, if I look at the real estate aspect of this, and I'm looking at, say, a growth rate of, call it even 10%, which has not happened, even in these red hot, historically high real estate markets that we're looking at now, 8 or 9% is unusually high. What is the average real estate rate of return on an index? Do you have any idea what the average is at this point? Don't they usually say about 3%?
3% is a kind of the rule of thumb. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so if we were to go outrageously high and call it 10, I mean, what? I mean, a 5% rate would be $12,500 increase, right, over the course of that 1 year period, along with the $6,000 in rental income. So we're looking at about $18,500 in overall returns throughout the year. Putting that into the original $50,000 investment, right, out of pocket, we're looking at a 37% return. Well, here we are.
Been what so far?
My return right now is 50.4%. But if you were to go in and just Google search average rate of return from from Bitcoin specifically for the last 10 years straight, to my knowledge, that number is 200% or greater. So at this particular stage of where Bitcoin is, it's very difficult to justify directing my attention and my resources towards the long-term buy and hold real estate net worth investment. So long-term net worth is where my short-term net cash flow has to end up. So at the end of the day, guys, I'm looking at this and saying, holy smokes, long-term buy and hold real estate can't even hold a candle to the historic results that have been coming from Bitcoin for the last decade. And even though there's this really scary daily volatility that takes place, the long-term highs keep getting higher and higher, and the short-term lows keep getting higher and higher. It is scary, folks. For those of you that are, again, too weak to be an investor into this space, I don't blame you. Look at this just today, Michael. So this morning, 9:56 a.m., $347,000 in my Coinbase portfolio. 8:38 a.m., $346,400. 7:48, $342,000. 6:45, $341. 6:33, $340. 5:39 a.m., $334,000. Literally from 5:39 a.m. this morning. No, not quite that high. We went from 334 to 9:56 a.m. of 347. So it's a $13,000 swing in a 4-hour period of time. It sort of feels like you're just sitting at a roulette table, and that is tough to handle sometimes, man. So I only invest what you can comfortably afford, but I think you bring up the greatest points out there in that I don't have to be the expert to know that Elon is surrounding himself with experts before he's going out and plopping $1.5 billion of Tesla's money, shareholder dollars, into Bitcoin, and he has to then answer for that down the road. And I asked somebody recently, why do you think Elon did that? Well, because he's rich. That was the response. I said, it's not his money. It's not his money. So I don't have to be the expert to follow that example. Or you've got Michael Saylor, CEO of MicroStrategies, famously now known as one of the most bullish institutional investors into Bitcoin at somewhere like a $4 billion portfolio at this point. Last I had heard, Elon had made close to what he generated through Tesla sales already in his Bitcoin returns as a buyer at 33,000 per token. This is where things are heading, friends. And if you listen to the arguments by some of the folks in the links that we'll put in the description below, you'll continue to hear the argument that the institutions have to follow. So imagine when Amazon is buying billions, imagine when Facebook is buying billions, imagine when Apple is buying billions. We've got all of these other big banks that are leaning towards it now. I mean, Jamie Dimon, CEO of JP Morgan Chase Bank, was complaining about Bitcoin even just a year ago, acting as if it was one of the worst things he could do. I think Mark Cuban at one point said, between a banana and Bitcoin, I'd rather have the banana. So it's,
Warren Buffett's another guy out there really downplaying all crypto, across all crypto, and he's obviously one of the biggest investors in the world. I mean, that guy just prints money with his investment strategies, and he's still down on it, even with what's going on right now. So there's some people that are going to be bears against it regardless. Obviously, you're bullish. There's a lot of people that are bullish out there right now, but there are, people that are totally against it, and maybe they're going to have that, aha moment where they ultimately play a position in it, and maybe they just stick by their guns and never do it, and either regret it down the road, or they had the foresight to not get involved in it. I don't know. We'll find out.
Well, and that's true. And so, again, I want to just take one step back into the imminency of a $500,000 Bitcoin. We'll leave it at that. When you compare all of these different features, all of the different properties that make Bitcoin popular, and then we compare the market cap of Bitcoin, which right now, inside Coinbase, I open up my Bitcoin data here, and what do we find? Open up the Bitcoin token, and it says market cap is right now at 1 trillion. 1 trillion market cap. Okay, 1 trillion. Gold's market cap is 9 trillion, folks. Okay. Look at the history of gold over the last 10 years. Look at the history of Bitcoin over the last 10 years. Look at the history of real estate over the last 10 years. Make your decision according to the data. If the market cap of gold is at 9 trillion, then Bitcoin has to improve by 9x market cap just to reach the same valuation as gold currently is, and all of the properties of Bitcoin appear to be superior to that of gold, which means that 9 times a $55,000 current valuation puts us at a $495,000 total coin value, which, by the way, if we double or triple or 10x the market cap of Bitcoin to gold, that's where you're going to start to see million, 5 million, $10 million coins, which is where some of us speculate that things could go. So without the education of people much smarter than myself, I really wouldn't have any perspective about this whatsoever. These arguments just make sense to me. You'll hear things from the WINKLEVOSS twins, which are very early adopters of cryptocurrencies in general. Full transparency, I own 5 different coins, and we're going to talk more about crypto on future videos. And Michael will have interviews with people that, again, are much smarter than myself, so that you guys can ask your own questions. Go ahead and submit some of those down below as well. Let us know what your position is too. Hopefully you're going to get in on this, Michael. I think it just boils down to a percentage of how much you're willing to invest, right? Don't anything but zero.
Yeah, and I'm already above 0 on it. But yeah, you're exactly right. So, I'm kind of having to untrain myself, just like you have, over the last handful of months, to get involved in this, as opposed to putting my money where I normally would. And another thing I wanted to touch on here real fast, we talked about the Coinbase direct listing. For a direct listing, that really caught my attention, as opposed to doing the IPO, which meant they were fully capitalized. Obviously, Silicon Valley was very well behind them, but there's only been a handful of companies out there that have done that. That's very significant, and nothing that I want to rush past. Right now, it's trading more, and it's higher than the entire New York Stock Exchange combined. Goldman Sachs is only at 110. So that's really the only big entity that would be higher than Coinbase right now, and that's just phenomenal. Additionally, there's some pros and cons to this. I'd like to really kind of get into some of the cons on it, if you don't mind, Matthew, and just some basic questions that people are maybe watching this video and they want to see maybe what next steps would look like, if you've got time to answer a couple of these.
Yeah, I mean, if I can.
Yeah, I think so. So I think the biggest hindrance in crypto across all the entire industry is that people are just so unfamiliar with it. The idea of wrapping your head around a decentralized financial landscape is very challenging for most people. They are only thinking of it in terms of banks their entire life. And then for this to throw in, and it's completely decentralized, I think that throws people off from the get-go. You know, you mentioned a question earlier, you know, do I have to buy a whole Bitcoin? You know, most people aren't aware that you can buy bits and pieces of it all the way down to the 0.00000001. And I don't even know what that number is in my head, but I know there's a lot of zeros involved with that. So a couple other things that are making people a little apprehensive are, you know, the theft and the hacking. You know, have you had any experiences or have you had trepidations with investing because of that? Well, early on, crypto was thought of as that kind of currency of the underworld and criminal activity. Obviously, we're not there today, but gradually it's gotten to this point. You know, was that something that kind of held you up from investing in it initially?
I mean, it was scary, of course, but I got to tell you, what's scarier is the way the banks and our government choose to manage money. I personally have been somebody that has always been opposed to typical banking procedure. It feels very one-sided. I would say systematically, we could all make the same argument, regardless of which aisle you tend to fall on, that the government is failing at economic improvement and their spending, and the fiat currency that governments rely on is headed for disaster, far more so than my mom thinks I am with Bitcoin. I can assure you of that. Which means that what are your alternatives? It always boils down to that for me. It's never the dollar for me. And where I'm going to be looking and focusing my energy is taking a percentage of what I'm generating from a cash flow standpoint, from a net worth standpoint, and putting it into this asset class. I think it's fine to invest in almost anything. I just think this is going to far outperform any of the other options that I do have. I do plan on diversifying. This is not an either or. It's not one or the other. It's everything for me. So it's about how I decide to split that up. I've heard arguments of between a 1% to 3% contribution rate of your net worth. I've heard that same percentage of your net cash flow. Personally, I'm trying to grow my net cash flow with 75% of my cash flow by putting it back into businesses and putting it back into income streams, so that I can take a larger 25% cut each and every time to put it into crypto, to put it into Bitcoin. So my objective is 25% because I see it as being the fastest category of my development. As far as hacking, to my knowledge, Bitcoin has never been hacked. It's considered much safer than gold is. Obviously, dollars and bars of gold can be confiscated. You can be robbed at gunpoint. Unless somebody is actually torturing you to give them your passcodes or your cold wallet, you know, because you can store all this offline. In fact, it's recommended that you purchase a wallet that you can actually store offline, unless somebody you're carrying that around with you, which would be so bizarre, and you lose it, or somebody steals it from you and then forces you to give them your passwords. This is much safer overall than any version. As far as the sort of black market underground utilization of this stuff, you're telling me that the U.S. dollar is not famously used for illegal,
It's filthy.
illicit activities?
Of course. Yes.
Right.
Every
Wash
bill
your
in
hands.
circulation today is completely filthy. Yes, of
That's
course.
right. If you touch a dollar, wash your hands. It's disgusting.
Someone looking to get involved with it, those would be questions that I would certainly have. You know, there's little security in case of loss. You know, if a bank gets robbed and your money's in there, obviously you're covered by the FDIC. Mm-hmm. If you get scammed on a credit card and your merchant provider, obviously you've got the ability to dispute the claim, dispute the fraud, and they'll credit your money back to you. You know, what fail safes are there, if any, at this point? And I've heard of a couple. I've heard of the company out of Clue. I believe they're called Clue. I believe they're in Canada. And what they can do is be alerted when fraud happens, and they can literally put a monitoring device, basically a GPS tracking, on that Bitcoin that's already exists. And only when it gets to the exchange can they actually make a move, and they have to have cooperation with local law enforcement, for example. So have you heard any stories like that? Is that something that keeps you awake at night?
No, because although I do think that scamming is probably going to end up being the most common way that people lose Bitcoin, which it does happen. I've seen videos made about online influencers that are scamming people. For anybody to make any form of a transaction where they're committing portions of their crypto portfolio without ensuring that it's completely safe, that will not be something I'm doing. I'm not going to be handing over part of my Bitcoin to somebody. I think that this sort of just becomes a general rule of thumb is to not do that. But even smart people can be conned. You just have to be very careful to keep it, again, keep it secure in an offline wallet. But no, that's a great question. I think it's very, very normal for people to have these concerns. But I certainly, after looking into it further, have managed to mitigate those for myself.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of companies that are coming out there, and obviously this is a relatively new financial space, but there will be checks and balances in place. There will be some form of governing body over top of it, some oversight. I think ultimately in 2018 alone, there were $1.7 billion in thefts and scams reported with crypto across all of them. So, that's a huge number. I haven't seen an update since then. There was almost like 58 million or 60 million only a year or two before that. So, these hackers and these scammers and, the theft, these people are smart. I got a phone call yesterday and just quick short story, and it popped up on my computer. So clearly I had some sort of, malware or something that had, crept onto there somehow. And I called the guy and he pretended to be Microsoft, and he said, well, this is what I need you to do. Go to this offsite. And obviously my bell immediately started ringing. And, the guy had a fairly thick accent, and I asked him what his name was. And he said his name was Dave Parker. And I said, well, 2 and 2 are not adding up to 4 right now. But, there's some people out there that, and I wouldn't even consider that a savvy move. That just in business, I'm always a little bit skeptical about people in general, especially in a situation like that. But there's so many folks out there that are just going to be very vulnerable to those. What can they do to protect themselves, if anything, at this point?
Just don't be dumb.
That's very, very simple advice right there, but probably the best.
So before we wrap up, I did promise everybody this debt weapon, because this is, in my opinion, one of the things that makes my pursuit of Bitcoin hyper exciting. I argue that this might be one of the biggest reasons that I feel confident putting such a large amount of my reserves into Bitcoin versus doing something else with the money, because I could actually sort of double dip into those dollars. We talked a little bit about the infinite banking concept and how that might work with insurance. Well, what if you could do that same thing with Bitcoin? What if there was even a way where it all tied together to, in this sort of really sweet kind of fabric? And I believe that's possible. And I'm gonna beg MC Lobster to come on and interview with you, because I want him to share how he's doing that. He's actually going out and buying all these resorts by relying on the infinite banking concept, the traditional approach to it, with the ability to actually access and borrow cash or coins using your crypto. So for those of you guys that are wanting this resource, check out Celsius.network. I was hoping to actually put it in application on this video, but I think it's just going to make this video way too long. But let me just put one thing in here in their sort of hypothetical little simulator. If I go to the bottom where it says test it out and see how it feels, and I enter in a desired loan amount in US dollars, I'm going to put in there just 75,000 bucks. Let's say out of my 360 some odd thousand that I've got in my portfolio right now, I need 75 grand back because I find the perfect property. And let's say out of that 75,000, I want to pay it back over 36 months. That's the longest term that they make available. They've got 6, 12, 24, and 36. I'm going to select 36. It says my collateral that I would need out of Bitcoin would be 5.4 coins to make that 75% work at a, that 75,000 work over 36 months at a 25% LTV. So if I was willing to collateralize 5.4 of my Bitcoin, I would be able to pay this back with a total of $1,687 of total interest and $46.88 per month at a 0.75% interest rate. Guys, 0.75% is basically free money. I could literally turn around right now, take 75 grand out and buy $75,000 of more Bitcoin with my own Bitcoin on a 0.75% rate loan. with a 200% rate of return average over a decade of this asset class. So yes, the numbers can drop. I think the number last March in the very peak of the pandemic dropped down to about $6,600 per token. We had a real crash in March of 2019. I think the low then came all the way down to like $3,400. But again, go back to the all times of this. If you had 5,000 Bitcoin that you bought for $1 a piece, and the value had fallen from an all-time high of $20,000 per coin all the way back down to $3,400 per coin, your portfolio at that point would be worth a mere $17 million. Folks, why am I looking at real estate? Has to be my question. It has to be my question. Do it all. Don't do none. Don't do none. That's the moral of the story.
You don't hear the word mirror in front of $17 million very often. So kudos to you on that, Matthew. If $17 million is mirror to you, then we've got a lot more to talk about.
You could congratulate me if I had purchased my 5,000 tokens for $5,000. Unfortunately,
right.
Future remains on the mug, my friend. So with that being said, let's go ahead and wrap up.
Well, great conversation today, Matthew. Obviously, we're very fortunate that we caught you again before you get on the road. We're excited. You and I have been collaborating for the last couple of weeks now on new content that we're going to be able to deliver to the audience. Very excited about that. I dropped a couple hints. We're obviously going to be diving deeper into this crypto over the next couple of weeks. So just excited to share with everyone. Appreciate everyone welcoming me to the channel. And first and foremost, you as well, Matthew, my brother. Thank you.
It's been great. No, this is going to be super, super exciting, folks. We've got really great interviews lined up. We're even looking at doing an interview with Meet Kevin here shortly as well. We've been trying to get that planned for about 2 years now. So this is going to be a really phenomenal opportunity to finally be on his channel and vice versa. This is cool stuff. I mean, this is literally a once in a lifetime period in the wealth creation chapter of my life. Hopefully it will be in yours as well. If you are looking at buying Bitcoin, go to a Coinbase, set up a Coinbase account. We'll throw a link below. We'll each get free $10 in Bitcoin to start you off. You'll start with free money. We will gain $10 from you as well. So check out that user link in the description, along with all the other starter links that I'm going to throw in there for you. Hopefully this serves at least one of you well. We'll look back in 10 years and be like, thank God we made that video. And you'll say, thank God I found that video. So we'll look forward to seeing you guys on the next ones. Until then, of course, make it a great day and keep on Bitcoining. See you soon.